Looney Tunes Nail Art Mural Part 3 by Hotpinkzebrapolish.
Hi guys! In today's video I'm going to be showing you part 3, the final little segment of my Nails Magazine mural contest entry for this year. So in the previous videos I showed you how to do all of the background stuff and putting the tips together. This one is going to be the fun part, painting all of the characters. So I hope you guys like this. I know this is a longer video, but it does go through painting all the different things as well as just some random ramblings from me if you guys like that. There's plenty of that in this video, so I hope you like this whole thing and like this really fun little mural that I did. If you guys are at all interested in entering, I would highly recommend you marking it down in your calendar for next year, setting a reminder on your phone, whatever, so you can get it done. You have to mail them in by mid-December, so maybe set an alarm for November or whenever it is so you think you have time to do it, because it's a lot of fun and it's always a great opportunity to give your brain a little bit of something to think about. So definitely set a reminder for that, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.
So I'm going to begin with Foghorn Leghorn, and the first thing I did is I added a layer of white paint over a section of his body that I had filled in with my blue background color before. So just, if that happens, you can go ahead and paint over it. It's not a big deal. So I'm filling in and touching up all of his lines with white acrylic paint. The background layer of white that I did before, I only did one coat of it, so it wasn't as bright of a white as I needed. Plus this way I am blending in just a touch of gray here and there to add some shadowing on all of his arms and his body and his hand. Or wing, I guess, not arm and hand, but wing. And then I'm going to be filling in his head area with red and use different shades of red because he's a rooster, so he's got a lot of red on his head. Ooh, I'm rhyming. Anyways, you want to make sure that his head and everything pops out from the background, so make sure it's not the same shade of red as the background, so it's a little pinker or a little oranger or something. Fill in his beak with yellow, and this is the same yellow that I used for the Looney Tunes logo in case anybody's wondering, but that I think is okay because it's not right next to it. And fill in his mouth with some burgundy. And just keep adding the little details. So on everything that I'm doing, I am shading these characters in. So I'm not just using a flat color. I'm not just using yellow. I'm using yellow and highlighting it with some white, blending it in, or adding some orange for shadowing or something. And even on their eyes, you want to just keep adding little bits of different colors in just to give them so much more depth and more personality and just make them a little bit more interesting. And then I'm going to take black paint again, and I'm going to go through and redo all of my outlines. At this point, you have a better idea, a better grasp of what the outlines are. Before, your original outlines, those were sketches, and it's kind of like your first draft. If you are writing something, you need to go through and you need to make your final draft, which is what I consider those final little black outlines to be. So next in my little list is going to be Sylvester, and I'm going to start out his head. And for his head, instead of going straight to black, which is where you might want to go just because you think he's a black and a white cat, go with something that's like a charcoal, a dark colored paint, not all the way full on black, because if you do that, you have nowhere to make it darker. You are already at your maximum. So if you do it where it's not quite that dark, you have an opportunity to add some shading in there, and your outlines will pop out some. Otherwise they would just disappear. And I know one thing that I have mentioned in the previous videos, for this design is that you start out and you work in the front and you do Bugs Bunny and you work your way back to the characters that are behind. And for when you start filling them in, you work with the characters that are behind and you start working your way forward. And I started with Foghorn Leghorn, and then I worked on Sylvester, and Sylvester is behind Foghorn Leghorn, so you might be thinking that I'm lying to you, and I did this not the way that I'm telling you to, and that is true. I don't know why I didn't do Sylvester first, but I didn't. I started where I started, and that is just how that goes. So next I'm going to be doing Wile E. Coyote. All these little rules that I spout out sometimes, they're all flexible. Everything I do, I might not do it the same the next time I do it. Sometimes you can switch up the order of things and it doesn't matter at all. But they're rules of thumb, so take some of the things I say with a grain of salt because everything, and it's all personal preference too. So like I said in the little video, or the little words, Wile E. Coyote is probably my favorite, and I did mention that in the other video as well. I didn't discover the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote until I was probably 14. I never really watched cartoons when I was little. It just wasn't something that I enjoyed when I was a little kid, where you normally think of watching Saturday morning cartoons, that kind of an age range. I just had no desire for it. I guess I was working on other stuff, but I found the Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner when I was older, and I was watching YouTube videos, and I just think he's hilarious, and it's one of my joys now. Like one of my little guilty pleasures is watching the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. And here's another little fun fact. and one that I was, maybe you guys all know this and it's old news, but I thought it was interesting. I got a DVD of Roadrunner, like season 1 or something from my library. And it said that you had to be 18 plus to watch it because it's not rated to be suitable for kids anymore. Which I was just stunned that it was like a rated R movie to get this classic Looney Tunes cartoon. I was a little flabbergasted by that. After I have Mr. Wile E. Coyote done, I'm going to be working on my Tweety Bird, who is sitting on top of Elmer Fudd's head. And my little Tweety Bird is my mom's favorite. She loves Tweety. In fact, we had a parakeet a while back who is named Tweety Bird, a little yellow parakeet. Currently, our parakeet, her name is Yoke, so she's not a Tweety, but yeah, Tweety Bird is fun. As you can see, I didn't quite make his head big enough, and like I've mentioned before, everything is, you can fix anything you want. So I'm going to be adding a little bit more to the top of his forehead, add his eyelashes, eyebrows, some little head feathers, and then I'm going to go through and start working on Elmer Fudd, beginning with his hat. And same thing like I said before when I was talking more specifically about Foghorn Leghorn, every single one of these characters has shading in it, as a little bit more depth than I might sometimes do if I'm just painting a teeny tiny one on one of my nails. I don't have very much room on my own nails for it, but in this situation you have so much more space to be able to add all of that shading and extra depth into it. So with the greens, I'm blending in white just because the other greens that I have aren't quite the right shade for his coat. So I went through and I just did some white highlighting, and depending on how much white you use, that's perfectly fine for any of the colors. Add some of a nude type color, a light peach color over his face. Fill that in and take that down. Every time I see one of these characters and it's before I filled in their eyes and their eyes look so hollow and empty, I think they look so creepy at this particular stage in the painting process. And I think I've mentioned that in, it was a video on my art channel. I was like, man, this character just looks so goofy right now. Very Dia de los Muertos is always what I think of in my head. Very Day of the Dead. But they will eventually get their eyes. So I'm going to go through and do some outlining here and there. This is the same thing. I don't always follow my own rules. Normally I would say you want to add all the pupils and stuff first just to get those done, but I went through and did outlining other places first. But go through and outline his eyes, nose, all of that good stuff. Keep adding all of your details. Doing these little outlines I think is so fun. It's something that it looks a little bit, your characters might look a little bit fuzzy, not quite complete, but then once you do just a couple of those outlines, they really come to life and they look just hopefully how you were planning on them to look. So now I'm going to be working on my Roadrunner. And while Roadrunner is really top of my list for favorite characters, Wile E. Coyote is the one I always root for when I'm watching it. Possibly morbid, but it's so sad, One of these days he has to win, right? But then I'm going to be going through and doing his head feathers on his face and then adding his beak and his mouth. And he is just kind of sticking out to the side, so you don't actually see too much of Roadrunner, a little bit of his neck coming down, and you want to make sure that that is a brighter shade of blue than what your background blue glitter was, so that that pops out away from the rest. Highlights to the head feathers, outlines everywhere. And when I did this design, I looked at so many different pictures of the characters. So I initially found a photo that had all the characters in this circle like I had envisioned in my head, that I liked how they were placed. I liked the characters that they included. And I used that one as my base, but then I went through and I got character-specific photos for each one. So I went through and I had pictures, individual pictures for the Roadrunner, for Elmer Fudd, for, so on and forth, Daffy Duck, Bugs Bunny, all of them. That way I had something that I could reference that was a little bit clearer of an image, and if I wanted to change the shape of a character a little bit, give them a different facial expression or whatever it was, I had that opportunity to stray away from the photo. So if you have, and you're looking at something, whether it's this or anything else, and you're like, I like 6 out of 7 elements of this photo. I wish I could just find one that is exactly what I'm looking for. Try to find something that as close as you can, and if it's not exactly what you're looking for, get some other photos that fill in some blanks for you, and you can make it how you want it to be yourself. And maybe you created something new and it's not the same as everybody else's, and that's great if you can do that. So now I'm going to be filling in Mr. Porky Pig. Same thing, starting out with that nude color, filling that in, going around all of these, and same thing like I did when I was talking about making those initial outlines. It is very challenging at times to work around all of these little bumps that the nail tips create, and that is something that having the right brushes makes a big difference. Try not to use a big brush. If you use a big brush, you have chances of getting things that are going not where you tell them to, because you think you're painting on one side of the nail tips and your brush happens to be hitting the other side because it's so close proximity that it just happens. So a smaller brush is definitely recommended for doing this, and taking your time is recommended, and really, really looking at what you're doing. If you think it would help you, there are some really wonderful different sight aids that you can get. I know that I have one. I don't use it very often because typically for myself I feel like it makes it so I can't see things as well just the way it is. But if it's something that you think would help you, you can get lit magnifying glasses. So it's a magnifying glass that has a ring light that goes around it, so it can light what you're working on very well, and it magnifies it so that you can see what you're doing very clearly, if that is something that you think would help you. And I would highly recommend getting one of those if you're doing any kind of work like this and you personally feel like you could see better than you are seeing, and that would help. I know my mother, she had laser eye surgery back when it was 30 years ago or something, when it was just kind of coming out on the market and being available to consumers, and wasn't fully, it wasn't as good as they are today, let's just say that. And there's a certain spot in her vision where everything is foggy regardless of what glasses she's wearing, but something like that magnifier works really well for her because it just changes the way her eyes are looking at it, and it makes it so that she can see things way better. And so stuff like that, depending on your scenario, glasses don't necessarily correct whatever it is that you're looking at. So if you need to have something, then go for it. My close-up vision is perfectly fine. It's my distance vision that goes south for me. So looking at something close up like this, I can do without any struggling. But if you want me to read a traffic sign without my glasses, that's a little bit down the road, it's not going to happen. So that's where my poor eyesight comes into play. I'm now working on my Bugs Bunny. I did his gray, his mouth, all of his white areas, and even in the areas that you want to be bright white, like his chest and his hands and around his face and his teeth and his eyes, on any of the characters that have places that are white, you do still want to add a little bit of gray in there for shadowing, because if it is just stark white, it's going to look so flat. So same thing, keep adding your little shadows in there. And when you're working on something like this and you're initially placing your characters down, definitely keep in mind where the different nails start and stop. And like for my particular mural, where it's a top and a bottom segment, you've got these little diamond shaped holes here and there. Try to place those in areas where they're going to be the least obnoxious. They're going to be the least distracting from the design. So just be careful of those. And then apply a layer of either whatever kind of top coat you like. I went with glossy gel top coat to make sure that my sparkly blue in the background was sparkly. So apply that. If you don't want to do a glossy one, if you want, sometimes it's easier to see the characters if they're matte. Otherwise, apply a matte top coat, whatever you like. I hope you guys enjoyed this little mural series. I know that I had such a blast making them. This is the third year that I've done tutorials for my mural, and the fourth year I've entered the mural contest. So I will definitely be doing this again next year. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy. So if this is something you think you would enjoy and you're licensed, I would highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well.